Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about my recommendations for the best one tricks for the start of Season 11. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Just go ahead, take a moment right now. It's just really easy, just a couple of simple clicks. Subscribe, like, really helps out a ton on the channel. And then we have lots of guides like this always coming out, so be sure to check by for more. We stream every night starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time, usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. I try to talk as much as I can with the chat while I'm playing. And we also do some single-player games if you're interested in that as well. I do a lot of Total War Warhammer, and then I've recently done a Cyberpunk playthrough. I've done a Witcher playthrough, and lots of other stuff, so be sure to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I just want to talk really quickly about what it takes to be a good one trick in my mind, and then I've got a top 3 for each role that I'm going to go through, and then I'll mention several honorable mentions as well that you might consider as you go through. And just for reference, last season I topped out, I think, at D4. I might have touched D3 briefly about midway through the season, but I was D4 for most of the season, and I am a support main. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get in here. So why would you one trick in general? The number one thing is you have just better knowledge of all of the matchups. So you're going to know exactly when you can all in, the items you should be getting, when you should rotate, and you're just not going to have to think about it as much, which is going to free up your mind to be able to macro more. So instead of, having to hyper focus only on your lane to try to decide, when you can go all in and what you should be doing and how to aim your skill shots and all this, you can have better peripheral vision to pay attention to the stuff going on around you, right? So you can look at the mini map a little bit more. You can see if someone's flanking you. You can pay attention to the positioning of other people in team fights. And all of that's really going to help you out a lot. So it just gives you a lot better matchup, or a lot better knowledge of your matchups. Better mechanics. More likely you're going to hit your skill shots. You're going to hit more CS because you're going to be used to the auto attack animations, all of that good stuff. And just better macro, like I just mentioned, because you don't have to focus as much energy on your lane because you played the matchup dozens of times, or maybe even hundreds of times. Then you can focus on the map a little bit more. So that helps out. And Riot is just not going to punish you for that, and they probably won't ever in solo queue, unless they create a system, excuse me, where you can see the enemy names in champ select. Then one tricking is pretty much always going to be good. It does fall off in pro where they know who you are and they can ban you out, and it may not work as well in Clash. And if you're like a streamer or something and people are ghosting you, maybe in higher elo, it can be tougher. But for most people, it's going to be one of the best ways to climb. And if you get into Diamond Plus, you'll notice that the vast majority of players, unless they're pro players, are going to play 1 to 3 champions most of the time to get a lot of their games. So anyways, that's why one tricking is really good. So what does it take to be a good one trick in general? Now, these are qualities. Very few champions I'm going to recommend are going to meet all of these qualities, but these are things that you should be looking for when you're thinking about a one trick. It's not just which champions are strong right now as of patch 11.1 when I'm making this video, but it's which champions should you invest your time in that will still be good, hopefully, for at least another 5 or 6 patches, and maybe for years. Some of these champions have been good for years to one trick. So these are some of the qualities you're looking for. So it's going to be a little bit different from the patch to patch tier list that I come out for, because I'm assuming that if you're going to one trick, you want to invest a lot of time, and you don't want your one trick to suddenly become much worse because they get hard nerfed in a patch or two. So the scope is just a little bit different from a normal tier list. Okay, so what does it take to be a good one trick? Number one, you want something that has less than a 25% presence in solo queue where you can help it. And what presence is that's the pick rate plus the ban rate. So Darius, for example, here is going to have 45% presence. And I do have him on my list, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, because he meets a lot of these other criteria. But in general, you want stuff that's people just don't really think about a lot, because you want to play this champion a lot, right? And if it's getting picked all the time or banned all the time, you're not going to get to play it, and that's going to be really bad if that's your one trick, because you want to be playing it, at least 70% of your games, most likely, if you're trying to climb. So less than a 25% solo queue presence, less than a 75% pro presence, because if something is played all the time in pro, first of all, it's going to get picked or banned a lot in solo queue because people, copy the pros a lot. But second, it's very likely to get nerfed if it's getting picked that much in pro. Not always, but very often if something is that present, then there's going to be some kind of nerf coming its way. So it could get hit with the nerf bat. You gotta be careful about that. And, you know, it is helpful, although it doesn't super matter, but it's nice if they have more than a 7% delta. And I'm looking at Lolalytics over here, and the helpful thing... Why? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. That was weird. Delta just means that if you put more games on the champion, what's the difference between someone who plays the champion really well, like the top players on the champion, and just your average person who plays the champion? And usually this is a marker of skill expression on the champ. So, for example, if you look at something that is really high skill cap, something like a Camille is going to have a 7.7 delta versus something like a Malphite's going to have a 1.3. So there's not much of a difference if you're a one-trick Malphite or if you just, you know, autofill play Malphite, because there's not that much skill in that champion, so that's why it's only a 1.3. Now, sometimes there are some oddities here, some stuff that has a surprisingly high skill cap if it's not picked very often. But for the most part, this is a good indicator of skill. And why I say that that's helpful is it'll be more interesting to play it. You'll feel much more rewarded when you get really good on the champion, first of all. But then second of all, a lot of times those really high skill cap champs, not always, but often, they're not going to be banned as often because people are not going to be as strong on them, so it can lower the presence as well. But the main reason is just that you're going to be rewarded a lot more for learning how to play that champion. It's going to be fun, it's going to be interesting, and you're going to see some, you know, really big gains on the champion. Because if you're going to play a champion 500 times or something, you know, a lot of people want to feel that reward, right? They don't just want to be playing Malphite every game, although sometimes it's good to do that. So some of the champions on the list, I tried to pick something that is usually like a little bit lower on the skill ceiling there, but a little more approachable. But a lot of these champs will be difficult to play and will have high deltas, especially if you look at something like Tom Kench is an example of something that's just really not that great but has a high delta because no one plays him. Dr. Mundo as well. So it's not perfect, but like Yone, for example, has an 11, right? There's a huge difference in a good Yone player and a bad Yone player. Same thing with Yasuo. Same thing with Gangplank. So anyways, that one's not as important as some of the other ones, but it's helpful. OP. So this is just, the champion needs to be really strong. This is really obvious. A lot of people, you know, understand if you want to one-trick something, it needs to be something that's good. But you want to look at 4 different categories. So resilience, how difficult is it to kill this champion? Damage, how much damage does the champ do? Mobility, how mobile is the champ? How many dashes do they have? How many speed ups do they have? And then utility, what do they bring to the team in terms of CC or other types of buffs or debuffs they can apply? Proficient in many metas, this is very important as well. So ideally, this is going to be a champ that is not just good in a tank meta or an assassin meta or any of the other types of metas that are out there, but they're going to be good in a lot of different situations because they can be played in different ways, or they have different types of itemization, which are things that I mentioned here. So they have different items, different runes they can be good with. So Camille's a good example of this, right? She can build more damage. She can build 1 damage and then a little bit tankier. If you wanted to build that way, she can go with the lifesteal. There's just a bunch of different items that you can go with on like Camille or Darius or Rakan or Thresh. So just having that versatile itemization of runes, versatile playstyle so they can snowball when they're ahead, they can flex to multiple roles, they can win several different ways, they can split push, they can team fight, they can play when behind, they can play when ahead. So just really versatile. And then limited enemy counterplay, so stuff that ideally can be blind pickable if you're really good on the champ. So something that, you know, can't be easily countered by just a couple of especially popular champions out there. So very few champs will meet all of these criteria, but ideally some of the best champs will meet most of these criteria. So anyways, let's go ahead and get in here and make sure we have enough time because we are going to be going through, you know, at least 15 different champions here, and I want to spend at least a couple of minutes on each one. Okay, so Camille is my number 1 pick for top lane, and Camille is almost always going to be a really good champion in general just because of her kit overall. She has really high burst damage potential. She has really good engage with her ultimate, especially very strong gank assist. So whenever you're 6, a lot of top laners just can't deal with it if someone comes up to gank and you just ult on top of them. then that person's going to die. So it's almost like a point-click kill in a lot of situations. That actually has pretty good outplay potential as well, because you do become untargetable whenever you jump. So really high skill cap Camille's can do things like jump a Malphite ult, jump a Darius ult. There's just a lot of situations where you can use that ult to dodge skill shots or otherwise make yourself untargetable and have some really strong outplay potential. Pretty good trading in lane with her W. It's nice range, gives you a little bit of healing if you hit it consistently. Very good at taking towers with the Q auto attack reset. She's got the true damage to deal with tanks. She has her adaptive shield, in order to play well against both physical damage and magic damage. And she's got that versatility, right? So in the past, she's taken Press the Attack. She's taken Conquer in the past. She can also go for Grasp, which is what she's currently doing, to be a little bit tankier. So you have, versatile item choices there. And then as far as damage options, you have a lot of different options there too. Historically, she's got Trinity Force, but Divine Sunder can be very good if you're against tanks or you just need that little bit of extra health against certain burst matchups. You can also take Gore Drinker, which can be pretty strong. She's taken Eclipse before. It's not doing so hot right now because it's been nerfed several times. There's just a bunch of different items you can get. And then second, if you want that lifesteal, if they're not getting Grievous Wounds, Ravenous Hunter can be really strong, but you could also go Sterix if you're worried about getting blasted out. If you just want to do more consistent damage to tanks, you can do Blade of the Ruined King. So there's just a lot of different items and runes you can go with her. And, like I said, she can dominate lane, she can 1v1, she can split push and take towers really well. She can dive backlines with her E and then her ult to lock up, one of their mages or their AD carries to do really well. So just a ton of different options, and I think she's going to be really, really strong. Now, she is a little bit harder to play. You do have to make good use of that ult. You have to use the hook shot really well to help you evade ganks, dodge skill shots. You got to be able to hit the hook shot whenever you go in to get that stun. So you do get punished if you don't play her that well. But overall, just really strong, solid champion. My other one that I want to mention up here near the top is going to be Wukong. Now, this is someone who goes under the radar. And Camille in solo queue is pretty under the radar as well, right? She's only got a 20% pick ban. And then in pro, and I'm looking at the preseason because there's a decent amount of data. It's mostly from just China and Korea. The Chinese server has played like 1 day worth of games in Season 11, but there's just not a lot of data there, so I'm just looking at the preseason. Camille was picked, I think, a decent chunk in the top lane. She had a high win rate of 70%, but she was only picked she only had 55% presence pick ban. And then in solo queue, she only has 20% presence. This is someone who has the potential to be supremely powerful. She's got a 7.6 delta, which is pretty good too, but is really under the radar for a lot of people. So the pick is kind of high, but it still doesn't get banned very much. So that's really good for her. Okay, so moving on to Wukong here. Wukong is someone who almost always flies way under the radar, right? He's only got a 4% pick rate and a 1% ban rate. So you can get him almost every game if you want him. And he can be flexed as well, so he can be played top, he can be played jungle. I think in the jungle he's not amazing, but I believe he's still like sort of kind of okay in the jungle, 51% in the jungle, so he can be flexed. I guess in theory you could try to play him mid, but he brings that versatility as well. So most of the time he's going to be doing Gore Drinker. Right now it did just get nerfed a little bit for multi-target, but it's actually stronger against single target. So kind of like Camille, he can go very similar items. You're going to see this on a lot of top laners that are strong right now. He can go Gore Drinker, he can go Sunder, and he can go Trinity Force. So 3 different items. He can even go Omni Vamp with the Eclipse. So there's like 4 different items that are all 52% plus on him. That are all pretty good. And then even second items, look at this suite of different items that are good. Ravenous is pretty solid. Death's Dance, Sterix is very strong on him. You can even go Cleaver. If you have a lot of physical damage champs on your team and they have a lot of tanks, you need that shred, he can do it. And I think right now he's going Conquer. He could, in theory, go Press the Attack if you want that. He could go Grasp if you want that, but Conquer is usually where you want to be. And And he just brings a lot to the table, right? He can duel pretty well top lane. He can use his clone to outplay stuff or to block skill shots potentially. And of course, his ultimate is very, very good in team fights. Not only can he solo and split if he wants, but he brings a ton of extra damage to the team fights. And that knock-up CC is really good, especially if you have a Samira or a Yasuo or something else that can leverage that knock-up. But even just the knock-up itself, as you know, is not reduced by tenacity, at least yet. They said they might do that later on in Season 11, but they haven't done it yet. So it's just a really strong piece of CC, really good burst damage. It's got that invisibility to get access to the back line. So he's just the total package. And I don't know why a lot of people don't play him more. Maybe there are some bad matchups in the top lane, but he's been sitting at this for the entire preseason. And even near the end of last season, he just always is that like 52+% win rate. Vast majority of the time, people just don't play him a lot. He did get nerfed last season, some, but he's still going to be really strong. So I think Wukong is an excellent option. He sees almost no pro play. So that's very good. He's played twice, 50-50, so no pro play whatsoever, super low solo queue play. So he's definitely one of the undercover, like, really strong champs to play. Okay, and then Darius is the last one, and, you know, obviously he's almost always banned a lot. He's picked some, but he has no pro presence, so you got to be careful with him. But the new season is very, very good for him. Ghost is still going to be a fantastic summoner on him, but he can go Conquer. I think that's what you're going to want to go most of the time, so his runes aren't as flexible, but the items are actually quite flexible. People have started going Stride Breaker on him, which it just gives him that extra gap close and makes it almost impossible to run away from him. And there aren't that many champions that abuse this item right now. There are some, but it's getting less attention than something like Gore Drinker. He can still go Gore Drinker in Trinity if you want to, but it's really that Stride Breaker that just gives him that stickiness on top of Ghost to, you know, make sure that you secure that initial kill and get those resets. And then Sterix is just super strong on a lot of these champs too. Hasn't been nerfed yet. Even if it did get nerfed, you know, he can still go Cleaver or he can go Dead Man's Plate if Sterix does get nerfed. But the shield is just so massive. It buys so much time for you to get those extra stacks on him and just get those kills, get those resets. Just super good. He's great against a lot of the bruisers top lane. He's great against tanks in the top lane. And he just snowballs super hard. And he's very good, especially in like these mid-game team fights for, you know, like that second or third dragon. If he can get down there, it's just very, very difficult to deal with him if he gets ahead. He just does so much damage. He has so much sticking power with Ghost and Stride Breaker that he's just going to, you know, get those resets and just do Darius things and murder everybody. So, you know, once you start getting up into like Diamond Plus, people will play around him better. He is kind of a sitting duck early game for ganks. But if he gets, you know, a couple of kills, he can actually 1v2 in the top lane as well once he gets his ult and gets those resets if he gets ahead of his laner. So he's a terror. Everybody knows that, especially at gold and lower. So, yes, his presence is there. Yes, he is going to be banned a lot, so you do have to be careful for that. But if you can manage to get him and get decent on him, then he is going to be my lower skill cap, like really hard carry champion if you want that in the top lane. You can also substitute Garen. Garen almost has a pretty high win rate as well. Similar does Stride Breaker, takes Conquer, so he's just like a slightly less powerful version, I think, of Darius. He does split push better later on in the game, and he does take towers a little bit faster because of his Q reset. So he is going to be very strong, but he just doesn't like hard dominate, especially in team fights, as hard as Darius does, in my opinion. But you could run both of these in tandem. They're both pretty simple to play, and if Darius gets banned, you can just pick Garen, because Garen has pretty low presence, only about 9% right now. So those are options. Other top lane things, you could run a tank like Ornn. I personally would run something, if it's solo queue, that has more damage and can snowball a little bit harder than something like Ornn does. Shin was really good. His items have been nerfed quite a bit. Pantheon is kind of the flavor of the month. He's very strong right now, but I think he's going to fall off a little bit. Fiora is another one who is just kind of a worse version of Camille, I think, but she can still be very strong, excellent with some of the items that are out there right now. Then you have some of your other classics, like your Riven. If you're extremely good on Riven, can be strong top. The items aren't super favorable for her right now, but you know, you can still play through it. She still has some okay choices out there. And then like your Yasuo's and your Yones can be played. If you're really good on them, they can be strong. Ryze did get a buff on this patch. It hasn't really affected his win rate that much, but maybe Ryze. Mordekaiser can be alright. The mage items have been nerfed a ton. People usually don't want to buy the QSS, so because everyone wants to rush for their mythic, so you have a bit more time to kind of take over top lane before people start getting the QSS. And then Yorick is always like kind of decent if you one trick him, especially in lower elos. There aren't like a ton of like really powerful items on him right now, but he can be okay. I guess another couple of conspicuous omissions to my list might be Akali. Akali is extremely difficult to play, and she gets a lot of pro attention, so she's just going to be nerfed even more, I suspect, recently, because she's basically pick, ban, and pro right now. Yeah, 71% presence, 63% pick rate, so I think she's going to get nerfed again, but if you're just god mode on Akali, if you're smurfing, she can be extremely good. And the same thing with Irelia. It just... It feels like it's just a lot harder to get ahead on these champs right now than it has been in the past. But if you are extremely good on them, you can make them work. You're just going to have to work a little bit harder for it. Okay, and there are several others as well, but we'll go ahead and move on and get to the other roles. But those are just some of the honorable mentions. Okay, jungle, Nunu. It's just been like 53 or 54% win rate consistently for like almost over a year now. When the tanks were mega OP at the start of the preseason, he was actually over 60% win rate. So he was really, really strong. The only thing that was like more powerful than he was a Mumu, and a Mumu's been nerfed like a billion times already. So Nunu's just very, very strong and very versatile and always underestimated. People are going back to the Aftershock build, but he has been able to go for a Phase Rush build to stick to people and do a little bit more damage. So there are a couple of different options there. As far as the mythics go, you have several options as well. Sunfire is still the kind of the go-to that a lot of people are picking, just because it's just got a nice balance to it. It's 350 health, 30-30 on the armor and magic resist, and gives you the best damage in extended fights. But Frostfire is actually quite strong too. It's got a 3% higher win rate on him, and I think this does just give you a bit more stickiness. You're already going to be pretty sticky, but this gives you a little bit more. I think one of the biggest things though is that it skews towards armor, so it gives you more armor than magic resist, so a total of 75 resistances instead of the 60 that you get from Sunfire. And physical damage right now, especially after the nerf to all of the mage items fairly recently, physical damage is more prevalent, so I think that's why people go for armor, just because the stats are a little better. In theory, you can go for AP, but the mage items have been nerfed so much, I just wouldn't do it. Protobelt still has a decent win rate. Kim Tank seems kind of like a bait item. You're already so fast, you really don't need to index that heavily, and that is really a lot more towards magic resist, which you need to be more careful of. Getting extra armor also allows you to dive a lot more comfortably early game and take less damage when you are getting those early dragons and tanking Baron and things like that later on. So that's why I think that this is working. But he just basically has, you know, a bunch of different items he can get in the mid game. You know, you can go Thornmail, you can go Deadman's, you can go Spirit Visage. All of them are pretty respectable. You can even go, if you need a bit more damage, Demonic Embrace, second or third item. So very powerful tank. And what sets him apart from a lot of the other tanks is a couple of things. Number one, he has extremely good ganks in the early games. You can snowball your lanes really hard. So you have the CC later on. You have the utility. You've got the slows. You have the Blood Boil to buff up your AD carry later. You're just really tanky, and you scale really well with AP and HP. You've got all those itemization options, but you also gank extremely well early, and that's what's different. A lot of the champs that don't have all of those qualities. And you can secure the objectives pretty much every time if you learn how to time your Q plus smite. You get every Baron, every Dragon. You can do it in traffic, even if your support's not zoning off the enemy jungle, or you're having to go for some miracle steal on the Baron or the 4th Dragon when your team's behind or whatever. He's going to be one of the best in the game at doing that type of thing. And he's just really healthy. He can't be invaded and bullied as easily as some of the other tanks on the list, because he's always going to get the secure on the camp, as I just mentioned before, and he's going to be really, really healthy in the jungle, and he can itemize towards that armor early on without sacrificing his gank potential or his damage. So he's just really, really strong, and he's never played in pro. I'm not exactly sure why. I think he just, right now it's still kind of a carry jungler pro meta right now. You're seeing a lot of like Nidalees, Graveses, things like that. You're seeing tanks bot and then carry junglers. So he's just never played in pro. So that's really nice. So he's still, even though he's the highest win rate, people just don't like playing tanks. He's only got 17% presence in solo queue, so he's just perfect, pretty much, in terms of what you're looking for a one trick. I mean, he's a little simple to play. There is a bit of skill to him, but he's pretty simple. But he can definitely hard dominate and take over in the early game. Now, another one I'll mention here is Eve. And a lot of this is just a meta call, and we'll see how it shakes up. But a lot of the early game champions are getting nerfed quite a bit. Like Graves got nerfed. I suspect Olaf's probably going to get nerfed at some point. Nidalee and Elise are kind of rare in solo queue. You don't see them picked a lot. And so that just means that it's more likely that Evelynn is going to be able to get some farm early. And there's just a lot of squishies running around, right? Like almost nobody's playing tanks in solo queue outside of maybe the supports. And so that's a lot of targets for you to kill, and people just don't respect her invisibility. And she just does so much damage with Lich Bane. And just how strong that item is right now. Yes, they have nerfed Night Harvester, which does kind of suck. But it still does enough damage with the Lich Bane to be able to secure those kills. Gives you access to that back line so that you can kill the AD carries. And she just does so much damage if she gets ahead. She doesn't even need her ult. Like, the ult is nice if you have it, but if you get really far ahead, you know, you can just zero out anybody. And it's so hard to ward for her as the game goes on that she's just a real terror right now. And so I think that she's good, especially in solo queue right now, just because of, you know, like I said, you're not going to be pressured as much early, and she just does an extreme amount of damage off of like even just 1 and 2 items, and you do have that outplay potential with your ult as well. So I think she's very underestimated right now, and it's going to continue to be really strong. So she's only like a 51% win rate. She is banned a little bit, but it's still only 16% presence in solo queue and no presence in pro. So I think she's going to be a really solid pick as far as assassins go, just because of how the meta is shaking out right now. And then Nidalee's another one. Nidalee did get several buffs a couple of patches ago, and she is getting played, and she's doing very well in solo or in pro right now. But I don't think she's doing well enough to where she's going to get nerfed out. So yes, she did have 71% win rate in the preseason, but it's only a 41% play rate. And in solo queue, almost nobody picks and bans her under, you know, challenger. So yeah, it's like a 4% play rate and only a 48% win rate. But, and in the past, I haven't really liked Nidalee a lot, but I think that a lot of these changes are kind of favoring her. Sort of like Evelynn is just off of 2 items, you can completely delete people. And if you get good on her, I mean, you can completely lock out the enemy jungler, like, very, very safely. So a lot of these, you know, kind of squishy champs early on, because people are moving away from those tanks in the jungle. A lot of these squishy champs, the Graveses, the Olafs, and stuff like that, like, you can bust them up. I know you can destroy Graves early on, and Olaf, I don't know, but I think if you land that spear, you can definitely pressure him, because he does get pretty low on his first clear. So if you can get in there and get very good at counter jungling and warding, you can just completely take over the game as Nidalee, just by locking them out of camps, just constantly, just being a pest, ganking lanes, and she just moves around the map so quickly in her cougar form. And then later on, you do have a little bit of utility with your E is a nice slow, and it does increase the attack speed of your AD carry if they get really fed. And AD carries are very strong right now. Give that extra 60% attack speed, and just chucking those spears just to get people low before it engages can be pretty good. So she does require a lot of skill. She's going to be one of the most skill-intensive champions on my list. Not only just because you have to hit the skill shots and know when you should go in and follow up on that spear or not, but just because of her playstyle, what you have to do, which is just like hard counter jungle, you know, read their pathing very well, intercept them, understand, you know, the pressure of your lanes and when you can go counter jungle and when you can't. And she's very unforgiving, right? If you fall behind, she's just bad. She doesn't have a lot of CC later on. It can be pretty rough. But if you do want to play, you know, that early invade, early, you know, domination jungler, then I think she's becoming a lot better. Now, alternatively, you can pick Elise. And that's, you know, the first honorable mention that I want. Now, Elise is probably going to get some more pro play as well. So these two are kind of interchangeable. I think it is a bit harder to just dominate and take over as hard with Elise as it is with Nidalee. But Elise does have that root later on. She does have a higher win rate right now, 53 or 54%. So she's like low key right now, really strong in this meta. And you can go with her if you want. It's going to be that it's this pattern on a lot of these carry junglers is going to be Night Harvester into Lichbane. And a lot of this is Graves just being nerfed so hard. And what I suspect will be an Olaf nerf coming soon, that I think it's going to open up the possibility for mages. And mages in the jungle is nice too, because obviously you're going to have an 80 carry bottom. And then a lot of the stuff that's getting played, almost everything top, is going to be physical damage right now, except for maybe like some of the tanks like Malphite. A lot of that's going to be physical damage. So having 2 AP threats, and then, I mean, even sometimes the mid laners play AD if you've got a Zed or something else. So being able to run heavy magic damage in the jungle is very nice. In most, like right now, but in most metas, it's a pretty good option to have. So yeah, I mean, Elise is kind of a similar to Nidalee. Like, she doesn't have as much consistent pressure, but if you can get there first and just get that webbing out of the bush at people, you can just delete just one-on-one, just keep deleting people over and over again in the jungle. Pretty good ganks later. She can dive super well early on. She can drop that tower aggro with her repel. And then later on in the game, if you do land that cocoon, that does give you a bit of utility, because it is a 2-second stun, so that can really help your team just set up for a fight, right? And it gets down to like just a 10-second cooldown as well, so you can kind of spam this and just look for picks later on. So I think that Elise could definitely slide in there instead of Nidalee. Slightly easier to play, I think, but a very similar heavy counter jungle strong champ. Fiddlesticks is super good right now as well. He is a little bit vulnerable if you're going to get invaded, but especially at kind of lower elo brackets where people don't respect when he's off the map. Then you can get some really good ults and engage on people. He does have a lot of CC as well with his fear, his silence. Really strong champion. Olaf right now is super strong as well. Like I said, I think he's probably going to get nerfed. That's why I'm a little reluctant to recommend him, just because I think they're going to nerf healing. They did nerf it a little bit this patch, but if Gore Drinker gets nerfed out, is he still going to be as good? I'm not sure. Probably. I mean, he can go Conquer. I think he's gone like press the attack in the past, but almost always he's going to go Conquer. But I'm a little worried because of how the plus healing and shielding is going to go. And you do have to dominate early or you can fall off. He doesn't have a lot of mobility outside of his ult. So you can run through CC, but it's a lot more risky to go in and counter jungle to take them out if you get collapsed on. Like, that's the thing about Nidalee is you can go in and counter jungle and then get away. Like, you can usually jump through walls and they're not going to be able to run you down, versus with like someone like Elise or Olaf, it's a little more dangerous. But nevertheless, he's certainly like really strong right now and very respectable. Ivern can be good if you one-trick him. He does have a high win rate right now, but I think he's just too difficult in solo queue unless you're duoed with someone that you know can hard carry for you. I think he can be problematic. Echo's decent in the jungle right now. I have him as a mid laner. We'll talk about that in a second. Kha'Zix can be okay. He's really reliant on Duskblade to be strong, and Duskblade has been nerfed pretty hard right now, but he can be good if you do get ahead early. Hecarim is very strong right now. I think he takes a little while to come online. You really do need to finish that first item. But he's definitely respectable as well. Talia is kind of the flavor of the month. Super strong right now. I think she's probably going to be nerfed in a couple of patches. Usually jungle Talia doesn't last very long if it gets played in pro and before it gets nerfed out. Pantheon's kind of a flavor of the month. Can be strong right now. He can fall off. And Wukong can flex in there. Kayn can be good if you're good on him. Rengar's kind of in a tough spot in Shaco, but they can work if you get proficient on him. So there are several champs that can work. Graves, obviously, I thought of putting on here, but I mean, he's at 46 for the general population. He's still pretty good in pro. He is very versatile. There are a lot of different items you can build on him, but it feels like his numbers are getting a little bit low. Like, it is getting kind of tough out there for Graves, and some of these AP champs, he has very low magic resist. His grit only gives him armor, so I feel like the Eves and the Nidalees and the Elises can really bust him up, but he can be okay. And then Lee Sin is just, it's so bad right now to be Lee Sin. You can definitely make it work, but his win rate is far lower than usual, and that's why I don't have him on here, even though he can be very strong if you're good on him. Just the preseason has been particularly rough. especially for his itemization. So Lee can be good, but it's kind of rough out there. Okay, let's talk about mid lane here. So number one on my list for mid, and mid is probably the most diverse role. It almost always is. There's a lot of stuff that really can work in the mid lane. But I think that Zoe is super strong right now. Now, she doesn't have the highest win rate out there, but she is getting some pro attention. But several things are getting pretty good for Zoe. Right now, control mages in general are going to be pretty good. So kind of these mid-range mages. So like your Orianas, your Anivias, your Zoes, your Syndra, stuff like that are all very good because they've nerfed out a lot of the assassin type of items, and Ludens is emerging as probably the best item to go for a lot of mages mid lane just because it has avoided the nerf bat the most. It did get tapped a couple of patches ago, but like Night Harvester and Protobelt have had some of the hardest nerfs out there. Oh, what's up, Rory? Oh, Rory took a bath, didn't you? You look nice and clean.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Rory's clean.
Dad,
look at that.
You get some coffee, didn't you?
I did get some coffee. Yeah, I had some a little bit ago. But yeah, I think she's really good, and they really made.
Dad, look at it in your cup.
They really, yeah, wow. They really made the
It's empty.
the actives a lot more powerful on things like Redemption, Locket, Protobelt. You know, a lot of the stuff that she's going to be able to get off of those free bubbles are just very, very strong right now. Good job, Rory.
What's that? It's Tractor.
And you're not going to get...
Tractor's a man.
Oh, that's cool. Is that a new toy that Rory got?
He's the newest member of our family.
It's
Oh, okay.
Tractor.
Where did you get that?
In the frame store.
Oh, that's fun, isn't it?
She had to choose.
She got to choose
His
one toy.
name is Tracker.
Tracker, that's cool.
Tracker.
But anyway, so Zoe meets that. There's just a lot less assassins to pressure her. Some of her tougher matchups have been nerfed out a little bit. So like Fizz got hit kind of hard. Kassadin, I think, has been kind of rough in the past. He's sort of been gutted. And there's just not a lot of HP in the mid lane. A lot of the Rod of the Ages people have been nerfed out too. So I'm not a Zoe expert. I don't know all of her matchups perfectly. But she's getting played in pro. And I've seen some good Zoes in solo queue. And she's just historically been pretty good with items like Ludens. Adds extra to her burst, allows her to reposition a little bit more. So she just brings a lot to the table. You know, you've always got the chance if you just get one of those bubbles, like with the free... There is a little bit of RNG, but if you get one of those really good free item actives or summoner spells or whatever, it can completely turn the lane around. They still haven't nerfed that. People have been asking them to nerf that for a really long time, but it looks like they're just not going to do it. And then late game, she just has so much consistent poke. If you just get hit with one of those Qs, you know, it can... I mean, she can one-shot you if she hits the bubble, but even if she doesn't one-shot you, if she takes off 80% of your health, you just might have to back up and just give them the dragon or the baron or whatever. So she's just a terror late game, especially if you can manage to get that vision control. I think the Horizon Focus, I haven't seen that a ton on her, but that definitely seems like an item that can be very good. Pretty much just gives an extra 10% damage, damaging an enemy champion with a non-targeted ability over 7.5, reveals them and increases their damage taken to you by 10% for 6 seconds. So you hit that bubble, you deal that 10% extra damage. Now, I don't believe that applies to the true damage portion, because true damage is not usually modified by any sort of damage amplifications, but nevertheless, she is someone who could benefit really well because she doesn't need the CDR as much. Like, it's nice, but you can already spam your Q so much. So some of the secondary items you just don't need. You don't have to worry as much about the healing because you just one-shot people a lot of the time. So she just brings a lot to the table that can be very strong. Now, low-key, Lichbane's also pretty good on her. But anyways, very strong champion, lots of versatility. She's got the poke, she's got the assassination. She always has the RNG potential to completely take over. And is super strong champ right now. And yeah, we'll just see. Historically, she has been very, very good if you're proficient on her. Okay, and then my next pick that I'm gonna say here is Yone, and I think that he's getting played at even some in pro, not a ton, but a little bit in pro, and a lot of high-low people are playing him. And he just has a lot of aspects to his kit that I think make him someone that is good to one-trick. He's one of the higher skill cap champions on the list, so there is that. But he also has a surprising amount of versatility to his itemization. Gale Force right now is super good on him, and that's what a lot of the 80 carries are running as well. But it just gives him that extra little bit of burst damage, extra little bit of repositioning.
Dad, Tracker has a whopper.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, we'll play in just a second, Rory, okay? Daddy's going to finish up this video.
Tracker's like green and brown and white.
Then I guess you can go Infinity Edge second. Now, this was actually a huge buff because Infinity Edge, usually you need 3 items to be able to take advantage of this because it says once you have 60% crit, then blah, blah, blah. But now, because you get the double crit on Yone, then you just get that free benefit because it got buffed from 24% damage to 35% damage. So it's not as strong as Infinity Edge used to be, I don't believe. But it's still going to be a really, really strong item second on him. So just a ton of extra damage once you get that Gale Force plus the Infinity Edge. I believe that puts you at 100% crit because he did get buffed on this patch as well. But yeah, I mean, there's other stuff you can get as well. You can get the Bloodthirster if you want. If you go over the cap on crit now, you get a little bit of extra bonus AD as well. I'm not sure on the conversion rate on that. But it's good. And he can go in like with his, I think it's his W or his E. No, it's his E. So he can go in and just try to fight somebody and hang out near the back. It's great for tower diving. It's great for jumping into situations that might otherwise be a little bit dangerous for him to get into in certain team fights when he like meditates and goes in as his shadow. Kind of gives you a nice get out of jail free card. So that you can go in and get back out. And that's something that Yasuo has always had a problem with. People often compare him with Yasuo in that, whenever Yasuo goes in, it's so dangerous if you just get chain CC'd and blown up before you can do anything. Then that can be a real problem. And Yone gets around that with that mechanic, his sort of soul mechanic or whatever. He also does split damage, so people forget about this too, that he does half physical damage and half magic damage on his auto attacks and most of his abilities. So that makes it really hard to itemize against him as well. Because one of the big problems with going something that is physical damage in the mid lane is that everyone can just stack armor. If you have a physical damage jungler, which a lot of the popular junglers are physical damage, and then you have physical mid, physical top, and bottom, it's rough. Even if you have a magic damage jungler and you're running pure physical middle like Yone or Zed or Talon or something like that, it can still be really rough if the enemy stacks a lot of armor. So he gets around that a little bit. And he does have that extra shielding and lifestealing with his W, I believe, gives him a shield. So he's got a lot of resilience and works really well with Conqueror, Ravenous Hunter, and then if you get stuff like Bloodthirster or Death's Dance, that can be good. So he has a lot of different items that he can build, and he has built Shield Bow in the past as well. So tons of damage, a little bit of safety that Yasuo doesn't have. And the fact that he doesn't have Wind Wall means that he's going to be banned a lot less, because so many people ban Yasuo just because they hate Wind Walls so much that they will just ban him, right? So he does have 40% presence right now. So right now he is actually banned a little bit less than Yasuo is, because he's so much better than Yasuo is right now in terms of like his potential, I think. But I believe historically a lot of people just ban the Yasuo because they hate the Wind Wall. But anyways, that's my sort of like really high skill cap pick there. And then the other pick that that I'm going to pick is Echo. And Echo's strange. Like, he can completely take over games. He almost never gets played in pro. But especially if teams aren't running a lot of CC, if they can't lock you down, you get to use your ult every fight. He's very difficult to deal with. Does a ton of damage. His shield, or his little circle thing, gives you a huge shield. So that gives you some extra survivability. Then, of course, you have your ult to refill all of your health. Now, Grievous Wounds does reduce that, I believe, if you have Grievous Wounds on you when you do it. But it's still going to heal you for a ton. And so that gives him an extra little bit of utility. And then he also can just reposition so often with his E. He gets 2 different jumps. And he gets a ton of movement speed off of his passive. So he's very sticky and slippery. It's really hard to lock him down if you don't have a lot of CC. And he's just going to do a ton of damage. Has the pretty good wave clear with his Q as well. So just a lot of different stuff he can go. Yes, Proto Belt has been nerfed. But he still is going to do plenty of damage with the Proto, with the Lich Bane. They might nerf Lich Bane pretty soon. But until they do, it's going to give a lot of these champions enough damage to get the job done. So good utility, as well as really good damage and good mobility, and that's why he's near the top of my list. And he also doesn't have that much presence. It's 19% in solo queue with none in pro, so that's going to be pretty solid. Other honorable mentions, I think, in mid lane. Go ahead and pull this up. Obviously, Fizz is pretty much always going to be a really good solo queue warrior. Not only does he do a lot of damage, but he just has a lot of outplay potential with his playful trickster. It's really hard to lock him down. There's tons of mobility, low cooldowns on his abilities. Then Anivia is kind of a flavor of the month. I almost put her on here because she is really, really strong, and she's not getting played that much in pro, but she already got nerfed once, and she still has a pretty high win rate, and people are complaining about her quite a bit, so we'll see. But if it's for the next couple of patches until she gets nerfed, you should definitely consider Anivia. Her numbers are just super strong right now. She's got the stun, she's got the wall, really good zone of control with her ultimate, and tons of damage with her E after you have them chilled. So she's very strong. Victor's another one to mention. Now, he is getting played a ton in pro, or he was getting played, maybe a ton is a strong word, but he was getting played quite a bit in pro. But I don't think his win rate was that good. He did get nerfed a couple of patches ago, but I still think that he can be quite strong if you're proficient on him. And then Syndra, I mentioned earlier, is always, a pretty good choice if you're strong on her. Malzahar is another one that's pretty low skill cap and very high effectiveness. That ultimate is just never going to be out of style. It's always going to be strong. You have some resistance to engage champions like a Leona ult or a Bard ult with your bubble. It's very, very annoying to deal with that as a support when you're facing a Malzahar the bubble. Oh, be very careful, okay, with Sadie, okay? You can pet her, but you got to use gentle hands, okay? We'll go feed her in a little bit, and she'll let you pet her when we feed her, okay? So those are pretty good one tricks. Vlad's respectable if you can be good on Vlad. Zed is very good. Now, he's banned a lot, almost all the time. Duskblade did get nerfed, but Zed's definitely like a good possibility. He is pure physical damage, and once again, I don't like to recommend that a lot just because of like the vulnerability to your composition if you do that. But if you're really proficient on him, you can definitely make Zed work. And there's a lot of other stuff that can be good mid, but those are the main honorable mentions that I'll go ahead and throw out there. Okay, and let's go ahead and get to the bot lane here. Now, bot lane is a little bit easier. Bot lane is almost always the role that is the most dominated by just a handful of champions, I guess I should say. So, and I think this will probably be very similar throughout a lot of the season, but it could change if they change some of the items, but these are definitely shaken out to be the strong one. So Kai'Sa's one who has really emerged as being pretty dominant on the last couple of patches, and a lot of that is she's just so versatile overall, right? She can go like heavy crit items, she can get, some lethality items pretty well, she can even get some AP items if she wants to later on in her build, although I think those are less effective. But there's a lot of different things you can get with her. She is pretty heavily dependent on buying items that allow you to get your Q evolved really quickly, so you have to get to like, I think it's 85 AD, give or take, within the first 10 minutes or so is your goal, so you can get your double missiles. And then I think evolving and getting some attack speed to get your invisibility evolved, by 15 to 20 minutes is pretty handy. But there's just historically a lot of different runes you can go on her, a lot of different items. She's taken Press the Attack before, she's taken Lethal Tempo, and right now she's going Hail of Blades. So just pretty versatile on items, on runes, as long as you're, getting that Q evolved pretty quickly. And she's kind of the total package. She brings a lot of versatility later on. She's got the isolation damage with the Qs, so she can actually put up pretty respectable damage in the early game if you're able to get those isolations. You have your W, which does a surprising amount of poke early on, and that can set you up as well, so you can get your ult plus Q isolation to pick people off that are squishy and caught out away from their team later on in the game. Then you have your ult for that really big shield and also allows you to reposition in team fights, and you have your E for the invisibility and the repositioning as well in team fights. So she's very slippery for an AD carry, has lots of isolation burst damage, and puts out quite a lot of sustained damage as well. Her passive does a ton of damage, and her E gives you a lot of attack speed. So She's got the total package. Now, she is short range. Her early game is okay if you get the isolation missiles, but it's still going to be a little bit less consistently powerful than something like Misfortune or Jin in the early game, so you do have to be careful. I think she's a lot stronger than something like Vayne. I think she's just a better version of Vayne right now. Vayne is going to be better probably later on at just like constantly repositioning and kiting things like tanks or Olaf or, you know, stuff like that that's going to be running at you, but Kai'Sa's still pretty respectable at that. But as of right now, you really just want to go with the Hail of Blades plus Kraken build. That's going to give you some really good bursts for those 3 hits. Trigger the Kraken, get your passive stacked up, get ready to trigger the passive, and then be able to finish them off with, you know, isolated Q or whatever. So I think that Kraken is pretty good. Gale Force is another really strong option, though. It's going to allow you just to run people down or just to give you that extra little bit of repositioning and burst damage in the mid game. So I guess a lot of people actually kind of have transitioned over to that Gale Force build if you can use that effectively. So Kraken is going to be a lot better against tanks and like really long sustained fights, but Gale Force is going to give you that snowball potential and a lot higher burst damage for those isolation kills. So both are going to be pretty good. Do not get Man Immune anymore. They nerfed that a ton. Now, they might buff it later, but right now, it's just way too slow early game, and the payoff's just not enough. It's very expensive, and it's just not going to be very good right now. And then I think that getting the Collector second is a really good option because that has a really smooth build path of where you can just get your Noon Quiver plus Serrated Dirk, get your Q evolved early, and then you can finish the Gale Force, and then you can finish Collector later. Just a really powerful item. You're just pretty much going to get the Collector on like anybody. Second item. I'd be surprised if this item doesn't get nerfed at some point. It's because it gives physical damage, crit, and lethality all in one item, and it's got that execute damage with the extra gold, which doesn't seem like a lot. It's just a 5% execute. That can actually be quite a big deal. It just has a really weird stat allocation that's just like super, super powerful and snowbally. And then I think that you have several options later on. I really like Ronins if you're doing team fights. Infinity Edge is really good for just taking down those really tanky targets. And then Nashers, I guess, can be pretty good for just doing more sustained damage. This will give you the attack speed. If you go Collector, it doesn't have attack speed on it. So you would have to go either Ronins or Nashers in order to get your E evolved as a third item. Anyways, Kai'Sa is super strong. This is also 500 gold cheaper than Nashers, so I would probably get Ronins most of the time. Okay, Jin's another one that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. He was kind of the story of the preseason, at least in terms of AD carries. Just super popular, super powerful. So you got to be careful with Jin. Kai'Sa is very powerful and popular, so that's something to kind of be aware of. She does have 40% presence. She is getting picked some in pro, so that's something to think about. And then Jin is 55% presence, so you got to be careful trying to one-trick those champs, but they're just so strong right now and so versatile that I would definitely consider it as a good one-trick candidate. And then Gale Force Abuser plus the Collector does a ton of damage early, good utility, nice root with his W. If you can hit that consistently whenever your support starts the fight, it's almost always going to guarantee a kill. Traps, very good as well for controlling bushes, kind of getting some pseudo wards to protect you from ganks a little bit, and just really strong zones of control and damage, right? If they activate a trap and you hit the W on them, those traps do a lot of damage as the game goes on. So that can be a really good opener for you to go in and kill them if you can consistently, once again, hit those Ws. And that's the biggest thing about Jin, I think, is hitting the Ws. Grenades, really strong wave clear early. Then your ultimate, especially because you're going for that lethality early on, means your ult's really going to hit pretty hard. And you have that extra execute potential with the Collector with your ultimate when you're getting people low. And it's doing the Dark Harvest proc, and you're getting the percentage-based health on the fourth shot. All of this synergizes super well. And I think that fourth shot can crit as well with your ultimate. I'm not 100% about that. But having that extra critical chance there can be pretty good. But yeah, super strong, very versatile champ. He's built a lot of different items too. Gale Force right now is very strong, but earlier on in the preseason he was getting Eclipse before it was nerfed a lot. That was pretty good. You can even go for Collector early on, which can be pretty good. So a lot of different options with him. Then the last few champs, I don't want this to be over an hour. Misfortune's the last one that I'll mention here. Now she's going to be banned a lot less. She is seeing some pro presence, but she's down to 22%, so she's kind of the sleeper on the patch that I think is very good. Please do not go mana immune on her. It's so bad, especially after the nerfs. Just get Gale Force. It's going to be better. I know the mana early like feels pretty good and can seem, kind of strong, but I mean the percentage is not that much worse, I guess, but it just seems bad to me. Like, you really need to dominate early and just hard snowball and carry these games. Like, I would not leave it up to chance, especially for the first couple of months of the season while everyone's getting placed. Yeah, Gale Force is really good. There is an interaction with her if you time it correctly that can be strong. If you Gale Force forward and then press your R while you're in the middle of the Gale Force, it'll spread out your ult to make it much wider. Now, people can stand in certain spots in the middle and potentially not get hit if you do that, but it also gives you just a lot more range to hit people situationally with the ultimate. So you got to be careful with that. Go watch a YouTube clip on it. It's pretty interesting that you can make it a little bit wider if you want to, which is a cool trick. But you can just also do normal Gale Force things, right? Just dodge skill shots with it, run people down, kite, divers that are coming after you. Just going to be a very strong item, just like it is on everybody. Collector, of course, second item on everybody. And then final item, Infinity Edge, I think is just a good option. Your ult can crit, as well as just your normal auto attacks can crit. And Misfortune, she just brings a lot to the table in terms of utility. She's very fast. She can rotate really well. She gets very preferable back timings, which is a huge deal. Her base damage on her ult is massive, so even if you're behind, you can still make big contributions to team fights. Your E is phenomenal. It gives you just basically a point-click slow that you can't miss. It's 40%. Sets it up beautifully for your Leona or your Thresh or whatever to hit their skill shots. It almost forces a flash if you hit this open field and they don't have Boots of Swiftness to negate that slow. Almost guarantees that if anyone else is around, they're going to land their CC. So there's really strong interactions. And then if you get really good at hitting these Qs off of the minions to poke people, she can actually put out quite a bit of strong poke damage in the laning phase if you're able to push them under the tower and get that poke on them. So I think Misfortune's really good right now. She is a little bit vulnerable to stuff like Leona. If you don't go Gale Force, you're just kind of a sitting duck for a Leona ult or a Bard ult or something like that. But nevertheless, I think she's pretty good. Other ones like Ashe is okay. I think the meme build on Ashe is really holding her back. The Mandate build, which is pretty bad. Gale Force is far better, but it's not as much, fun, in quotes. I guess more and more people are moving away from the meme build. There's still some that are going the Mana Immune into Mandate, but it's really Gale Force into Ruden's Hurricane is where you want to be. So she brings a lot of utility as well. Good poke, good arrow for the engage, hawk shot. Excellent, especially if you don't have vision control of an area to help your support out. So Ashe is definitely respectable. Twitch, if you get ahead, can be good. Tristana is pretty good right now. Lucian's like okay if you can dominate hard. Ezreal is just a dumpster fire. Please don't play Ezreal. Samira is pretty good. I think Samira is overrated. Like, she is very strong. She does get played in pro if you get pretty far ahead, but she really risks getting nerfed in pro, and she's going to be banned out a lot just because people hate the wind wall. She's got the Yasuo effect. People hate playing against those types of champs, but Jinx can be okay. But yeah, those are pretty much the champions I would stick with. It's the ones that I just mentioned. Okay, and then as support, we've got the usual suspects here. I guess we'll go over probably by a little bit. Got Thresh and Rakan. Thresh is pretty much always going to be a pretty good go-to choice if you're really well practiced on him. He is difficult to play. His hook does have a delay on it, and it's fairly slow as far as hooks go. It's a slender hitbox. If the enemy sees you, knows you're going to throw a hook, it's fairly easy to dodge, so you have to predict it. Predict where their flash is going to go, or predict where they're going to dash or Gale Force or whatever. So it's pretty difficult to hit that unless you're throwing it out of a bush or something against competent opponents. But nevertheless, it is very strong. You don't have to commit to the hook, which is very nice and adds a lot to his versatility. So if you're not sure if it's safe to go in, or if your team's going to be on the same page, or if you just want to do a little bit of poke, right? If they're full health and you're sieging them, you just hook them once. Your team does 50% of their health. You don't have to fully commit, and then just look for another opportunity. That can be really strong. And then, of course, you have your... And he's very, very good with the new ability haste system. I will say that, because there's a lot more ability haste in the game now that's available for tanks like Thresh than there was in the past, because Locket gives you 20%. You can get 8% from your runes now. And then Zeke's is a really popular second one, so you can get 48 ability haste, which is about equal to 33% CDR, and still get mobility boots. Whereas in the past... you know, you would only be able to get 20% sometimes, right? If you went Zeke's plus Knight's Vow, in the past on Thresh, you'd get 20%, right? So it's much, much easier to get CDR. And CDR is great on a lot of tanks, but particularly on Thresh, because his E is a flat 3-second cooldown. So the lower your base CDR, the more powerful the hook becomes, right? Because if you have the 33% CDR, you can get that down to about 8-second cooldown. And then if you land your hook on somebody, it's a 5-second cooldown, right? Versus in the past, if, you know, it was a 10-second cooldown and you go down 3 seconds, it'd only be a 7-second cooldown on your hook. So it's very, very good, particularly on Thresh. And then your Lantern, you know, very good offensive and defensive. You can save allies with it. You can Lantern in your jungler. You can do fancy things like hook someone over a wall and then throw a lantern to an ally to follow you. So there's a lot of fancy stuff you can do with the lantern, and it also gives you a pretty decent shield for both you and your ally that take the lantern. So decent little utility there. Allows you to take stuff like a redemption without feeling completely awful about it. At least you have something that scales with the plus healing and shielding. Flay, pretty decent displacement if you do it. It's one of the trickier skill shots in the game. It's very fast. A lot of times if you're trying to flay someone towards you, you have to aim in the opposite direction to sort of flay over your shoulder. So it's a very weird skill shot that you have to get used to, that people mess up all the time, myself included. Even pro players mess it up. You'll notice it's one of the few abilities where they have, a lot of them will use like the flay range indicator on it, or like the ability skill shot range indicator. So, weird skill shot, but has a lot of potential. Very good against stuff like a Leona engage, or any other champion that's trying to engage on your AD carry. You know, Nautilus, Zac, Jarvan, just anything that's trying to dive in there. If you flay fast enough, unless it's unstoppable like a Malphite ult, then that gives you some pretty good peel potential. And then, of course, your ult's pretty good. It is on kind of a long cooldown, 140 seconds early on. The damage is pretty nice early. It's only a slow, so people can, you know, still dash and move around, so it's not hard CC. So it's not as good as something like a Leona stun, or like a Nautilus ult, but it's still okay. But yeah, just super versatile champ, can do a lot of different things. Right now, he's going, you know, Locket into whatever, Locket Redemption. In theory, if they nerf Locket a lot, he can go for stuff like Shirelia's, which can be strong. So he's just got a lot of different items that he can get. Okay. Other one that I'll mention is Rakan. Now, Rakan hasn't seen a ton of favor in the preseason. He is very, very good with the cooldown reduction as well, because all of his cooldowns are pretty long, but they're also high impact. So like his W and his E can get down to a 12-second cooldown. So he really likes the CDR a lot as well. And Rakan is unique, and I talk about Rakan a lot. He's the champ that I've played the most over the last few years, because he has really good AP ratios, as well as the ability to engage. And not only can he engage, but he can also go in and get back out in a lot of situations, which means you don't have to build as many raw tank items if you're able to avoid their CC. So, for example, if you go in with Leona, with your E, or you go in with Nautilus, you're going to get hit, or Alistar, you're going to get hit a lot, right? So you have to have those tanky stats. But with Rakan, if you go in with that W, you can use your E to jump back out, which means you don't have to be as tanky because you're not getting hit as much, which means that you have sort of that free space to buy stuff that can power up your team, so you don't need as many personal tank stats. So you can go for something like Staff of Flowing Water, which gives out a tremendous amount of extra value to your team, or Ardent Sensor, or something like that. Now, the preseason changed this a little bit because a lot of the tank items actually have quite a bit of utility also, and that's why the support tanks have been busted in the preseason, one of the big things, because Locket is extremely powerful right now. And then you have like Zeke's is extremely good too. Knight's Vow is actually pretty respectable, but especially Locket and Zeke's are just too strong for their budget, and you're just not sacrificing enough utility for how much tankiness those items give you. So they're probably going to nerf that at some point. But nevertheless, that's the really nice thing about Rakan is he can get in, he can get out, he can get team utility items. He's good when he's ahead. He's good when he's behind. Scales really well with plus healing and shielding. He's not just a Xayah champ. He's really good with a lot of different people out there. You do have to practice him because if you do get caught, if they hit you with CC or you're just consistently chasing too much with your ult and you get out of range of your E, then you can get blown up and you will get hard punished. And his W is a little weird too. It has a delay on it, so you kind of have to predict where they're going to be. Sometimes, depending on the champions, to hit your W, it's kind of like with Thresh. It's got that little bit of delay on it, so he is difficult to play, but if you do learn how to play him, I think he can be very strong, and he's going to be like the best healing and shielding champ, in my opinion, on most patches. And then the last one, I'm going to give this spot to Maokai, who has risen up quite a bit, and there's a couple of reasons for this, and the big one is the itemization, in that he does have a high win rate right now, but he can either go for kind of an AP off-tank build, or he can go for more of a full tank build, and that's sort of a unique option that a lot of other champs can't go right now. So you can go Imperial Mandate, which is very strong. It's one of the strongest support items, although the tanks don't get it. Like Rakan can get it, and and Maokai can get it. I thought they were going to nerf this, but they may not actually nerf it just because the tanks are so oppressive in pro. We'll see, though. I expect Locket will likely get nerfed. But it's just a really strong item on him. It gives him a bit more poke, gives him a bit more, gives your team a bit more mobility when he activates it. But he does have other options, right? So even if they do nerf Mandate somehow right now, you know, like rushing Dead Man's Plate, just so you get better roaming and better engages, actually 60% if you get it early. Locket, if they nerf Mandate for some reason but don't nerf Locket, then Locket's a good option as well. There's a lot of different things you can get on him early on. And then his base damage is so high on his seeds. Okay, yeah, it is. They're right there. Daddy's almost done, okay? Yeah, just lots of different options, and he does a lot of damage with those seeds. It gives you free vision. It's on a pretty low cooldown. It does like 14% max health when you get it maxed out, plus like 250 base damage. So it's a ton of damage on those seeds. Lots of vision, low cooldown. He might get nerfed. He's not getting played a ton in pro, and he's not getting played a ton in solo queue. He is seeing some pro play. Okay, hang on just a little bit. We're almost done, okay, Rory? What, you want the Poe? Okay, can you go watch it on the couch? Okay. So he's got that versatility, and then he has a nice, okay, you gotta go watch it over there, okay, Roy? Okay. So he's got the poke, he's got the vision, pretty good damage, and then his W is point click, so people can't outplay it. If you're in range and you W onto them, they can't Gale Force out of it, they can't Vayne Tumble or Lucian Dash or whatever, it's going to hit them. Right? There's no way out of it unless they Zhonya's or unless they have Edge of Night or something like that, or they take Cleanse, then they're not getting out of it. So it's really high reliable. What is it? Let me see. Is it not making any sound? Hold on, Ray, hold on. I don't know why it's not making sound, Ray. Hold on, let me see. Okay, that has sound. Hold on.
That sound wasn't my show.
I know, it's not your show. Okay, there we go.
Oh, it's too loud.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, she just got home and is wanting to hang out, and we're almost done, so we'll finish this up and we can hang out. But yeah, so he's got the point click W, he's got the seeds, and then he's got the Q for the knockback. Pretty good damage overall, and then his ultimate has a super wide hitbox and just CCs for a really large amount of time. So it's really strange to find a champion that has that much CC and that much base damage in their kit. And you can go for the Demonic Embrace right now, which kind of doubles down on your poke damage. Being able to go Morellonomicon from the support position is actually extremely good. Also, that means that your mid laner may not have to take it, which can save them a lot of gold. And anti-healing is extremely strong right now. Or you can go for Deadman's. That's not as common, but you can go for kind of that, like a Mandate and then sort of a tankier build after that if you really want to. You can also go stuff like Abyssal Mask, but most people are going to go either Demonic Embrace or Morellonomicon. So, and if you take Aftershock, you can still be pretty tanky and peel on the backline. So, good poke, good damage, good itemization choices. If they nerf the AP, he can build tank. If they nerf the tank stuff, he can build more AP. There's a lot of things to like about him. Now, the most conspicuous absence here that I had on the last list that a lot of people were, you know, probably going to be wondering about is Bard. And I do think that Bard is pretty good, but I think that the changes in the preseason have really hurt him. The itemization changes specifically have hurt him. So, yes, he can use Mandate. Yes, it is okay, right? Like, the slow on your meeps does trigger Mandate. That is nice. But the ability power is not, like, super great on him. So Mandate's all right. But he's probably one of the champs that got hurt the most by the lack of Athenes, because his W just does not heal for anything at all now without Athenes. When you had Athenes on it, he was one of the few champs that actually put out like quite a bit of damage and could heal and really needed that heal from the Athenes. So if you had the Athenes full and you healed him for 150, it'd be a 300 heal, which was pretty good. Like, that was very respectable for Bard. But now it's only like 150 heal whenever you don't have Athenes, and that feels really bad with him. And then, okay, you used to be able to rush a Deadman's Plate as well, which was really good on him because it gave you the extra tankiness and it allowed you to roam around, get more meeps, you know, position a little closer to land your ult, or after you land your ult, position a little bit closer, put yourself in danger where you can land the Q to pin people against walls or pin them against each other. So you could get that survivability early, and it just worked so well with sort of Bard's kit of wanting to be closer, get those stuns, get that positioning. But now, if you go Deadman's early, you can still do that, but you don't have a mythic if you do that anymore. Right? And so it's going to put you behind on your build compared to other people. So you're kind of priced into going Mandate or Shirelia's early, and that means you're not going to be as tanky, so you can't, and you don't have that same level of movement speed that you used to have. They also nerfed Deadman's a little bit to where it has a lot less armor. I think it used to have 80 armor. They did give it a little more HP and some movement speed, but it's not, I don't think it's as good as it was last season. So he had a really weird build with Athenes, Deadman's, and then sometimes things like Rapid Fire Cannon. And all of those just aren't as good as they used to be on him anymore. So it's like, he's okay, but he just had a bizarre build that is just not as good as it once was. And with everybody getting Gale Force now, a lot of the 80 carries getting that Gale Force, then it's not as valuable. It's a lot harder to hit them with your ults. Your ult's not as valuable as it once was. And a lot of the most powerful supports right now are also going to be the tanks. And if you ult them, it doesn't matter as much because they're going to be really tanky. So he really wants squishier, immobile champions that he can hit with that ult. Some of those are still around, but I just think those just nudged him down just a little bit. But he's still really good. So I think Bard is a very, very close third or fourth. I mean, you could even slot him in instead of Maokai if you want to, especially if you think Maokai is going to get nerfed, which I'm not sure. But those are the ones that I think are the best right now. Alistar is getting played. He can be okay. Galio is okay. He can be flexed to middle. Those are really kind of the other one tricks. Leona, I guess, is the one that I should mention here, who is super strong right now. I think she's the most OP champion in the support role by a pretty large margin, but she's getting played everywhere in pro. 89% presence in the preseason with a 55% win rate is just too much. Now, I thought it was too much last fall also, but she has just made it through all of these nerfs like untouched. Like, I think, what was she at Worlds? Let me just look. .22, I think, was LF World Championship. There we go. So yeah, at Worlds, 55% presence with a 71% win rate. So she had some of the highest presence of all champs. I guess not of all champs, but of supports. Highest presence, highest win rate, still not nerfed. So I don't know. I mean, I keep thinking they're going to nerf her, but then they don't. So if she doesn't get nerfed, she's the best. She's the best one trick to play because her cooldowns are just ludicrous. She has like a 90-second cooldown on her ult right now, and then she's got like a 5-second cooldown on her Q, a 6-second cooldown on her E. She just does way too much damage. She's too tanky. She's just mega OP right now. But I mean, her win rate in solo queue is not that far over the line, right? It's like 51 or 52%. She is getting picked and banned all the time in pro, but maybe they still don't nerf her. I don't know. So we'll just see. So she's risky, but if you do want a lot of free low right now, just get good on Leona, and you can definitely win. Now, she is getting banned quite a bit. Right? She's banned 31% of the time, so you got to be careful with that. But otherwise, I think she's a pretty good pick as well. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. We did go over time a little bit, but we're also trying to, talk about at least 15 champions, and really we probably at least mentioned 40 or 50 champions, including the honorable mention. So I'm trying to give you a bunch of different stuff to think about. So you can definitely win on champs that aren't this way, but these are just my suggestions if you want to put a lot of time in a champion and try to ensure that it's going to be good for a while and not nerfed out in a couple of patches. I think these are probably some of the best choices. So that's going to be it. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.